Even in the dream, Maggie had a feeling of joyful excitement. She was dreaming of her husband. Eugene was holding her close to him, and it felt so good. 3. So she opened her eyes at dawn. The sunlight slipped through the drapes, painting an intricate pattern on the wallpaper. She threw back the sheet, letting him continue to move over her naked body. 4. Maggie sat up on the bed and stretched. The sweet slumber had finally dissipated. The refreshing morning chill was invigorating. 5. Maggie got up, walked to the bathroom, and turned on the cool shower. She'd been practicing this for years. The hot water soothed her, kept her from concentrating, drained her energy. But this way, it was like having a second wind. You come out fresh and full of energy, immediately ready to get involved in the day's hustle and bustle. 6. She had a new day ahead of her. And tonight a restaurant, or the girl grinned. Dinner with Edie's son, her son too. Adopted though, but she's been there for him for 2 years now, going to parent-teacher conferences, listening to his revelations about his relationships with his friends and teachers. 7. Did she feel like a mom? I mean, she was only 3 years older. No, she didn't want to be. Her husband just wanted to give the guy the illusion of marital happiness, and she agreed to the game. 8. Yugi was lucky to have her. He was 38 when they met. 9. His first wife, Edie's mother, passed away when he was only 4 years old. The boy often told Maggie that he couldn't remember what she looked like. 10. The boy was raised by his grandmother, Yuji's mother. She was physically weak and her health was deteriorating with each passing year. She was only able to take care of the bare necessities such as food and clothing. 11. Therefore, Maggie in the person of Edie got a Terry triplet, which in addition was in the midst of puberty. 12. No one could find a common language with the teenager. Complaints poured in from teachers and neighbors. And he became friends with his stepmother only years later, when he turned into a tall, handsome young man. No one knew how she managed it, but she was the only one he seemed to listen to in public. Yugi had never been able to gain her son's trust, and did he want to? He'd go from one term to the next, and when he came back, he was in the pubs. 13. This way of life finally finished his mother. She died, leaving her negligent son a large house in the city center. 14. That's where Yugi brought his new wife. At first, Edie met her with a glare. 15. He reminded the girl of a bristling wolf cub separated from its pack. Lonely, hungry, angry, Maggie too was defiant and implacable with him. She was always the leader and considered herself the mistress of the house. That's why she'd go straight to the bottle in any dispute. 16. Young, sensual, and passionate, she only wanted to live by her own rules. She had no pity for the boy. He was in the way, not needed at all. 17. They disliked each other intensely. They fought in such a way that it looked as if they would fight. 18. Back then, she was deeply in love with Yuji. She knew about his criminal past and realized that he would never put a stop to it. But the man was handsome as a god, skilled in physical lovemaking, charming, generous. 19. Strong, tall, with big, bright green eyes, strong chin, dazzling snow-white smile, dapperly dressed and well-groomed. 20. He liked to take care of himself on the outside. He exercised, went to a tanning salon. 21. He had enough dashing money for metal ceramics, expensive clothes, restaurants, and women. 22. Maggie fell in love with him at first sight, as soon as she saw him at one of the popular night spots in town. 23. He too could not remain indifferent to the young, swarthy girl. A lot of people were paying attention to her. 24. Having seen her once in a restaurant, the man felt that this time he had an interesting woman in front of him and she would not be an easy prey. 25. She walked confidently down the hall in an open, short olive-colored dress. She moved easily, smoothly. Though she wore high-heeled shoes, she carelessly fixed her deep chocolate-colored, heavy hair smooth as silk. 26. With a keen eye of big brown eyes, she picked out in the crowd of men worthy of her attention. Bold, uninhibited, daring. There was no one like her on Eugene Smith's path. 27. When he saw her, he immediately started hunting. He went to the table where she was sitting with her friends and, flashing his tiger eyes at her, put an expensive bottle of champagne in the middle. 28. I'm buying, he said in his low, smoky voice. If it's not enough, I'll order more. 29. Why should I? Maggie said proudly. We're sitting pretty good. 30. I see, You'll sit even better like this." The man turned around and went to his table. 31. "And a darling thief," marveled Vicky, Maggie's friend. 32. "Calm down." She gave her a piercing look. "Mine. I could smell him a mile away. That green-eyed cat." 33. "Yeah, take it." Vicky giggled. "I felt it too, but you won't give it back, will you?" 34. "I won't give it to you." 35. At the height of the evening, Yugi and Maggie joined each other on the dance floor. They were irresistibly attracted to each other. 36. Smith could only marvel that his new acquaintance was so confident, so young and so bright. Her intelligence and grace were the envy of the mature women that Eugene valued so much. By the end of the evening, he was enchanted by the 37. He was afraid to admit to himself that Maggie had shot him right in the heart. 38. The bold, swarthy woman was unlike any ladies he had met before. 39. She was interesting to be with. She stood out among many charming, intelligent, and beautiful women. There was an inexplicable thrill in the man's soul, and he wanted to drown in his relationship with her. 40. Yugi caught himself thinking that all his previous romances had been boring, unremarkable encounters with a slight tinge of sympathy. 41. How many of them were there, arousing his quiet interest? Dozens, hundreds? Yugi was driven by one thing, the desire to satisfy his sexual hunger and add to his collection of men. 42. By and large, they were ladies for a night, a week, a month at best. But Maggie, she was alluring, sensual, passionate, and at the same time, she was her own guy. With her, you could get drunk, talk frankly, and even get a mind-blowing quality intimacy. I didn't want to part with her. 43. There was such an inner confidence sliding in her that one could not help but want to submit, to trust, to put all the reins of love and pleasure in the hands of this goddess. 44. Eugene had seen more beautiful women than that, but they didn't have the charms Maggie had. He wanted her all the time, every move she made. Look, word she said, it was a volcano of desire, a matchless rare trait. He was amazed to find himself admiring her swift gait, her radiant smile, her manner of jesting. 45. Yugi realized that a previously unexplored feeling had arisen in the depths of his soul. This attraction was unusual for him. He was swimming in a cocktail of excitement. He could not understand what attracted him to the girl. It was something elusive. 46. He never felt a shadow of embarrassment in her presence. He had fantasized with her in the bedroom. With Maggie, he was physically aroused, uninhibited, daring. 47. He did not immediately realize that it was his woman. At first, he just went to the light, flew to the young girl like a moth. Only later did he notice that he never got bored with her, never thought about business or anyone else. Maggie absorbed all his attention. She didn't stick to him with silly talk about love or pathetic sentimental feelings. You could be anything you wanted to be around her. Lecherous, drunk, crazed. 48. Yuji realized that he had a strong personality in front of him. No matter what their relationship would be in the future, he wouldn't be able to possess her completely. She would always have her own world, hidden from him. She would only open the door at will, but she wouldn't let him in completely. 49. Why don't we get married? He asked her a week after we met. 50. Just like that, for real? She laughed. 51. Yeah, I think we're right for each other, or maybe I'm wrong. He asked. 52. No, it looks like it. Maggie nodded and pressed her lips to his. 53. Yugi felt himself winding up. 54. I'll be yours. The girl slowly backed away from him. If you show class in bed tonight. 55. Maggie drilled the man with her velvet brown eyes and Yugi moved to follow her. Such games delighted him. It boosted his male ego, unleashed his instinct. 56. My place? He offered. 57. Let's go. Maggie shook her head, her luxurious hair spreading over her rounded. 58. Soon they were rushing in a cab through the night city. They entered a rented apartment. Maggie took him to the bedroom herself. 59. The room was half dark, and she had only one nightlight on. The girl, without false shame, threw off her dress. There was nothing underneath. Yuigi followed suit. He looked at her slender young body with admiration. Then he boldly approached her and embraced her. 60. In intimacy, she belonged to him completely. She was eager, inventive, either supple or elusive, either passionate or indifferent, always different, always unpredictable. 61. He enjoyed his woman, her animal magnetism, her gaze, her involuntary body movements, her languid sighs. With her, the whole world was just a backdrop for their love. 62. Eugene married her and brought her into the house as his mistress. 63. Maggie liked her new status. She enthusiastically took care of the repairs and household problems. 64. To his son, Smith put the fact of his marriage before him and told him to obey Maggie in all things. 65. The teenager gave the newlyweds a scornful look, snorted, and locked himself in his room. For a month, he barely spoke to them, answering questions one syllable and avoiding all contact. In time, he got used to it, but he showed his contempt for the new mother in every possible way, and he was cold to his father. 66. Of course, he had no time for his son. He was away on his own business during the day and in the evening in the bedroom with his young wife. 67. Maggie, on the other hand, was annoyed by the guy's behavior. 68. One night, as Yugi slept after a raucous sex session, the girl was drinking champagne in the kitchen. 69. She heard the key turn in the lock. It was Edie back from the nightclub. 70. He walked into the kitchen and saw Maggie sitting in just her panties on the windowsill. 71. Hey you, we need to talk. She began, I demand basic respect from you. 72. Why don't you get dressed first? Stripper. Yeah, who the hell are you for me to pay any attention to you at all? Eddie replied. 73. I'm actually your mom. You know dad's got a new term coming up. He's not gonna let go of his habits. 74. Before you even show up here, you think you know everything about everyone. What a witch. My father had a lot of sluts like that. 75. At those words, Maggie jumped up and slapped the teenager. 76. You say that again, I'll bury you, you puppy. Don't you realize who you're dealing with? Don't compare me to anyone else. I'm the only one. Under 77. Edie was startled at first. Then he rubbed the sore spot with his hand and suddenly grabbed Maggie's arms and pulled her back, tilting her forward. 78. Try that again and I'll fuck you right on the kitchen table. He ripped the girl's underwear. You're older, but use your head. I'm taller and stronger than you. I've been fighting for a long time, so get the hell out of here before you get a kick in the ass. The guy let the girl go. 79. A cheeky smile spread across Maggie's face, and you're not as easy as you look. She backed away from it. 80. Then she lay down on the table and began to stroke her body. Okay, I take my ambition back. You surprised me. Come to me now that you've started. 81. Edie looked at the swarthy, beautiful girl. She was good. 82. The guy decided to use it and tell his father about it. 83. I will take you, he said excitedly, undressing. 84. Maggie's breath came in short gasps. A handsome, muscular young man stood before her. He was horny. In his hands, the guy held a cell phone. He turned on the camera. 85. Edie walked up to her and possessed her. Roughly, quickly. His emerald eyes glowed with nothing but hatred. 86. He left her alone afterward. Picked up his things from the floor and went to his room. He filmed the whole process. He watched the video several times in his room. 87. That's the dirt tomorrow. I'll show my father. He decided as he fell asleep. 88. He woke up to soft lips caressing his body. He pulled back the sheet. Maggie. 89. Are you crazy? He tried to push her away. I don't want you. Yesterday's contact was for fun. 90. Liar. The girl ripped off her bra and put his hand on her breast. 91. That's it, cunt. Edie wheezed. He grabbed the girl by the neck and threw her onto her stomach. He piled his whole body on top of her and thrust in a frenzied rhythm. 92. Where's Dad? He asked when it was over. 93. Gone somewhere, Maggie whispered. 94. What time is it? 95. Noon. 96. Through the ajar window, I could hear the hum of cars, people's voices, and children's laughter. It was a day off, and many people were going to their 97. Maggie got up and walked to the shower. She came back a half hour later. 98. You need to stop walking around the house in the nude. Edie said to her, I'm sick of being a nymphomaniac. You're worth a lot to your 187. They spent hours enlarging the pictures to get a better look at them, but they saw no signs of violence. 188. Well, said Greg, We're not going to see anything in these pictures. Did she die accidentally? Assault or accident? No struggle, that's for sure. No scratches, no bruising. Dress is intact. 189. What happened to you, girl? Expensive clothes, fancy manicure, well-groomed hair. How sad for your loved ones. 190. She has no one but her husband. Edie sighed. He's been looking for her for years. Now she's found her. 191. Who's the husband? Why don't you tell me? 192. A father. 193. What's wrong with you? Why didn't you say anything? Yeah, our guys were talking about the case, that he was wanted from the penitentiary, but they didn't find him then. How can I tell him now? 194. I'm not going to tell him anything. I'm not in good health as it is. I've ruined it. I thought I'd be young forever, strong and sturdy. Maybe he would have been if she hadn't disappeared. After such news, he gave up. 195. So he'll be officially notified anyway. 196. So let's tell Greg when he'll be home. It's only 5 days. She's got no ID on her. And the only people who know the girl is Maggie Smith, are you and me. Don't put my testimony on the record, and while the investigation is ongoing, the father will be free. 197. Okay, Tyler agreed. Have it your way. We need to know where she came from, where she's been, why she came back, and why she died. Here, go ahead, gather that information and bring it to me in your beak. Look for any witnesses who saw her alive. 198. Eddie couldn't sleep at night, remembering his and Maggie's stormy past. He got out of bed, went into the kitchen, poured himself a drink. Then he sat down to look at the pictures on his laptop where he transferred them from his phone. 199. Magnified them. Victim's makeup was bright evening wear, probably going to some kind of hot spot. Did she make it? We need to scour restaurants, hit an underground casino. No sign of a struggle anywhere. Full smile on her face. Stoned. I don't think she's ever been high before. But who knows? She had a passionate, uncontrollable nature. 200. He was awakened in the morning by a call from Lillian Watson. 201. Sedated with clofulline and exsanguinated. She blurted out angrily. 202. How's that? 203. Drained of blood. Even if she'd woken up, there was no chance of survival. That's the most egregious case I've ever seen. What do the police know about the girl? 204. Nothing. No leads. Oh, by the way, was she raped? 205. UAEA, no. 206. I'm going out tonight to look for information. I'm guessing she spent the evening or night somewhere in public. Dressed festively. 207. Yeah, according to her stomach contents, she had a big meal somewhere before she died. Also, her shoe heels are covered in someone else's blood. I'm typing. 99. We'll see about that. The girl glared at him. I haven't tried it on top of you yet, she purred, slowly crawling onto the bed. 100. Together they stayed in his bedroom until well into the night. Iwi woke up at midnight and went into the kitchen. The house was dark. 101. Strange, so father never came back. He worried. 102. Then I went into his room. Empty. Edie woke Maggie up. 103. Dad's still gone, he told her. 104. The girl reluctantly got out of bed, wrapped herself in a sheet, took the phone from the bedside table. She dialed Smith's number several times. 105. He hasn't answered, she sighed. It's weird. He hasn't been to the casino in 3 months. He hasn't hit on any women yet. Come on, get dressed and let's go to the hot spots and look for him. 106. Pulling a wide sweater and jeans over her naked body, Maggie jumped into the driver's seat, pressing the klaxon several times. 107. Why are you ringing all over the street? Edie came up to me indignant. 108. Sit down, son, she frowned. My intuition tells me to hurry. 109. The motor roared and the car sped off. Maggie drove as well as she liked. No brakes, as they say. In this case, it wasn't even figurative. But it was a quick detour to all the hot spots. Smith's car was nowhere to be seen. 110. There's only one place left to go. The girls stretched out, and a couple minutes later, they arrived at the police station. 111. Yes, the duty officer nodded tiredly. They took Yugi for stealing from a jewelry store. You know, he's the kind of guy who doesn't stay out for long. 112. Well, Eddie swore profanely. It's pathological. 113. You're in my hands now, kid. Maggie smirked, as prompt as ever. Just in time for me, actually. Let's go home, and now we'll see him only after the trial, and then only on big holidays. 114. Smith was sentenced to 3 years. He was sent to a maximum security penal colony. Maggie came to see him for an extended visit. He was released to a hotel for 24 hours. 115. To her surprise, he pounced on the food first, and then on her. 116. The girl was standing by the window. He came up behind her and began to caress her neck, collarbones, breasts. He turned her toward him, wrapped his palms around her face, and completely surrendering to the power of his feelings, passionately pressed his mouth to hers. 117. She wrapped her arms around her husband's neck, pulling him to her. Maggie could feel his heartbeat quicken. The muscles in his abdomen quivered when she touched them. Yuki covered the girl's body with short, vigorous kisses and freed her from her clothes, picked her up in his arms and carried her to the bed. He entered her, quickly building up the pace of his movements. Moving to the beat, she moaned. Finally, their bodies shuddered in waves of bliss. Then Maggie was lying on his shoulder, and he was caressing the strands of her lustrous chocolate hair. 118. You're cold. Have you found someone else? He asked. 119. Don't be silly, she whispered back. I'm just tired. I'll make it up to you. Maggie kissed his earlobe. 120. Well, I recognize my initiative, girl. Ye. The man pulled her to him by her firm buttocks. You. With you, it's like in paradise. Hey. He kissed passionately into the girl's scarlet lips. 102,001. Their dance of love continued until dawn. Smith was satisfied. 122. Yugi and Edie are running out of money. What do we do? Maggie asked him this morning. 123. Don't worry, sweetheart, but don't give yourself to anyone but me. I'll strangle you for that. And you won't need money. I've got plenty of it. Enough for 80's kids. I'll write you a power of attorney. You can take it with. Don't deny yourself anything. Spend it on vacations, salons, pubs, but no men. Go everywhere with your son. You told me yourself that they became friends. 124. Making friends. The girl nodded. 125. I don't make you sit with a baby. He's interesting. I'll give you so much intimacy, you'll beg for mercy. Come on, one more time and then we'll break for breakfast. 126. Maggie was indeed drowning in her husband's caresses. He never let her out of bed, but while giving herself to him, she dreamed only of Edie. For the first time, the hunter of men's hearts was tired of physical love. Now she was not enough of the magic. She wanted to be in the arms of her lover. Being close to him made her a slave to happiness, and she wanted to be with Edie every minute of her life. 127. Meanwhile, his relationship with him was complicated. He slept with his stepmother and was tireless with her, but he only looked at her with lust, no love in his tiger eyes. He began to do well in school. Maggie hired tutors. The guy's behavior also became more even. He was less insolent to others, showed patience and loyalty. 128. Perhaps it was their intimate play that was draining him of energy. He behaved in the bedroom, unbridled and insolent, a master forcing Maggie to obey, to follow his every wish. He could order himself to incarnate into a nurse or a hotel maid, a bank director or a scuffly, and violently he took her several times a day, bound her with ropes, blindfolded her, put her naked in the street. One day, he invited his friends over to brag about living with a grown-up girl. He didn't hesitate to offer her to them. 129. HY her, fry her. He grinned, watching. 130. The guy seemed to enjoy realizing how much influence he had over her, and for some reason, he wanted to humiliate the girl. Maybe for taking away the last person he loved, his. 131. All Maggie's pride and independence was gone. She was ready to serve her idol every minute, to fulfill his every whim, to be a thing to this handsome, strong boy. 132. She was afraid that one day he would leave her. He'd fall in love for real, forget about her. 133. Maggie realized she had a certain power over the guy too, over his body. It responded to any fantasy the girl offered to light caresses. But she hadn't captured the boy's soul, no matter how hard she tried. 134. When she returned home from the colony, from her husband, there was a surprise waiting for her at home. 135. Edie put her things in a bag and headed out the door. 136. The girl's heart almost stopped. She beat helplessly at the door with her fists, but he didn't open it. 137. Finally, his head showed through the open window. 138. So what are you hitting with all your might? 139. Eddie, are you crazy? She flew to the window and reached for it. Don't you recognize your Maggie? Don't you want her anymore? Let me in the house and we'll talk. 140. Come on, run away. Take me to bed and you'll be mistress again. No, go back to your husband. Be a Decembrist to the end, he said. 141. Are you jealous? Maggie got excited. 142. Me? I'll share you with whoever you want. 143. Maybe you can share with others, but not with your father. The girl figured him out. Is that what you needed me for? To prove to yourself that you're better? 144. Screw Vivi, you smeary psychologist. You're wrong. I don't need you at all. I'm gonna live here with a girl. Young, decent, gentle, and I'll broom you out of here. I'm sick of you. You belong in a whorehouse. 145. You can't go on without me, without the sweetness of our experiments. You'll ruin a girl's life. Innocence is not your thing. You're like your father. Voluptuousness is your fifth gene. You're just bored out of your mind, admit it? My bastard. Maggie's eyes filled with tears. Just tell me to do it, and I'll do anything you want. I'll be yours every hour of every day, everywhere. I pray you open. 146. No way. Go away. He closed the window in her face. 147. I have your father's power of attorney for the money. Without it, you're nothing. She yelled as loud as she could. 148. Your blackmail won't work. Edie leaned out into the street again. I'll get by. I'll make my own money. Leave me alone. Let me breathe clean air. Since I'm your master, I'm letting you go forever. Live at your father's rented apartment. I don't mind. Just don't come anywhere near me. 149. Edie, I'm going to tell my father. I don't know what he'll do to you. Maggie was tearing her hair out in frustration. 150. Do whatever you want. I don't care. I just want to be free of you so I can live like a normal guy. I don't need your lust poison anymore. 151. What are you doing, my boy? How can you? I love you more than life. You've torn every string in my soul. I idolized you. How are you going to live? Have you thought about it? My father gave me the money, not you. 152. You're wrong. I've had an account for a long time, Maggie. Go away. You've sunk to the bottom of the pile. Is there no one to comfort you but me? 153. The girl gritted her teeth, grabbed the bag by the handles and dragged it along the ground. 154. Soon, along with a cloud of dust, she disappeared behind the gates of 155. Edie breathed a sigh of relief. 156. He knew that if Maggie came in and touched his body, he wouldn't be able to resist and would drown again in a frenzy of debauchery. She drew him in, gave him intoxicating pleasure, and he dissolved into her more and more. The guy realized that he would never have a life of his own as long as Maggie was around. He would not notice reality. His soul would be taken over only by lust and lust. Eventually, he'd lose his human form. He'll turn into an insatiable animal, unable to live without his female. 157. It's been 5 years. 158. Smith just sat there, and Edie never heard from Maggie again. Her father had tried to track her down from prison using his connections, but she was gone, vaporized. But the money from one of Smith's accounts disappeared with 159. Edie felt like he was completely free now. He remembered with horror how the first time he had been broken by the mere thought of Maggie. His body was bored, but his soul rejected the alluring image. 160. In time, all passions began to be forgotten, and he lived an ordinary life. 161. After finishing school and institute, he got a job. 162. His day invariably began with a cup of Americano. The coffee smoked on his desk as Edie studied his journal entries. Today, he had several articles to write and process. He'd been a correspondent for the popular local magazine, The Evening Lights, for a month now. 163. He took a sip of coffee as the computer booted up. The scalding beverage was invigorating. 164. There was a phone call. 165. Eddie, are you in the newsroom? She heard the voice of her father's old acquaintance, Watson Lillian. 166. She has been a pathologist and police expert for many years. 167. Yeah, I was gonna work. 168. And I've got a story for you. We've got a Jane Doe with no papers. 169. No visible injuries on the body. We don't know what she died of yet. Would you be interested in joining the investigation? 170. You bet. Charging my phone and coming to you. 171. Lillian didn't allow outsiders into the pathology theater, but Edie was allowed. First of all, she had long been hopelessly in love with Smith Sr. And secondly, she liked the guy's articles. They were truthful, based on facts without the slightest craving for yellow journalism. 172. Edie was amazed, of course, at the loyalty and affection he had for his father for so many years. It was also a mystery to him why he'd earned such loyalty and love. Women like Watson were hard to find. 173. Edie cast an interested glance at her, older but well-groomed. Not beautiful, a redhead with a scattering of freckles on her cheeks. Short boyish haircut, shrewd blue eyes, thin as a birch tree. And most importantly, strong, purposeful, in general, involuntarily. In addition to respect, there is sympathy. 174. Lillian rolled the sheet off her body. In that instant, Edie forgot everything in the world. 175. Dark, smooth hair, eyebrows like seagulls in flight, beautiful lips, straight, chiseled nose, a perfect, swarthy body. There was no doubt that Maggie was in front of him. 176. Are you feeling ill, Edie? The pathologist looked at the pale boy. Worried? 177. Very much. He couldn't hold back the tears that spurted from his eyes. 178. Edie stepped out into the dark hallway and leaned against the cold wall. 179. My father's coming out soon, so I have to try to pull myself together and find out what happened to his wife. He never filed for divorce, hoping she'd turn up. Should I tell him about their affair or hide it? What's better? 180. Edie took pictures of Maggie, said goodbye to Lillian, and went to the police department, hoping to learn something about her recent life. 181. Straight into the office of his close friend, Greg Tyler. 182. But he hadn't gotten any information from the MV database about the girl, nor any pictures of her yet. Eddie showed all of Maggie's pictures to a buddy. 183. Wow, what a sultry beauty. When she was alive, she used to spin men the way she wanted. He whistled. 184. Vertila, Edie said through gritted teeth. 185. What? You know her? 186. I had to. I'll tell you sometime. It's a long and murky story. 208. After breakfast, Edie jumped on the streetcar and was at the newsroom in half an hour. He excused himself from the chief, intrigued by the prospect of sensational news. 209. Oh, Edie, are you getting in trouble again? Haven't you had your snout cleaned enough lately? Peter Safanov ranted. The heavy-bearded man with round glasses smiled slyly at the boy. You like stories. If it hadn't been for Tyler's support and help, you'd be in the hospital with fractures. 210. Pete, these were low-level thugs, and here's a girl bleeding to death. It's a crime unheard of around here, so to speak, out of the ordinary. She didn't have a purse, maybe it was theft. But then why kill so brutally? The killer wasn't interested in proximity to the victim. If I'm to get to the bottom of this and help the police, I'm going to have to do a lot of digging. Please don't distract me with calls, just pass my workload on to someone else. Whatever's in here, it looks unusual. 211. The chief, knowing Smith Jr.'s persistence, only waved his hand in response. He said, go ahead, good luck. 212. For 5 days the boy was neither heard nor heard from. At that time his father returned from the colony. 213. The man was unrecognizable. He was old, gaunt. He called his son, but he didn't pick up. Good thing, as usual, the spare key was on the shelf in the shed. 214. Yugi entered the house and walked into the kitchen. There was a laptop on the table. There was an extension cord running from it to the mains. 215. Where'd you go in such a hurry, son? You left the appliances on. 216. He sat down across from me and opened the lid of the laptop. The screen lit up. Smith cringed when he saw a picture of a dead girl. He slammed the computer shut, and suddenly his heart started to pound. He took a closer look at the picture, and when he realized who was in front of him, he was literally dumbfounded. 217. Maggie? He wheezed and fell to the floor. 218. Eugene Smith woke up in his bedroom. The aromas of clean linens and freshly brewed coffee beans were unfamiliar. His son sat beside him. 219. How are you, Dad? He asked thoughtfully, adjusting the blanket. 220. I think he's okay. Maggie's dead. 221. Yay, I accidentally found out when Watson called me over. I thought I'd see a stranger. And then this happened. 222. Was she murdered? 223. Yes. 224. For what? 225. I wish I'd known. But I'm looking, Dad. I'm looking. You rest, recuperate. You shouldn't be worried. 226. Hey, son. I was alive only with the hope that I would find her and see her, and now 227. Edie's heart snapped with pity, looking at her grief-stricken father. 228. How can I tell him everything now? About them? He'll kill me with his own hands. I don't want this secret to come out. Maggie's gone, and I'll keep my mouth shut. What does it matter now? 229. We'll find the killers, Father. Trust me. 230. All right, son. I'll live for a while. I'll wait, said the man, falling asleep. 231. Edie went to shower, gobbled the sandwich without appetite, and froze at the kitchen table in the same pose. 232. I kept thinking about the results of my investigation. I was devastated. The story was too personal, too many white spots in it. 233. He used to be interested in racy stories, criminal cases, but now a young woman who loved him was murdered. Grief had broken his father. The mystery of their relationship darkened his soul. 234. Edie perked up. I should call the newsroom. 235. Pete, I have some news, but please let me rest today. I'm exhausted. 236. The boy sighed heavily, walked to his room, and collapsed on his bed. 237. He didn't wake up until sundown. He dialed Tyler. He got Maggie's info too. A lot of it matched. 238. Turns out, right after breaking up with Edie, Maggie went to the Outback. She had a fake passport and a life soaked in lies. For a long time, she was the governor's mistress, the keeper of a retired general, and dated high-ranking bureaucrats. 239. Eddie had been to the places where the girl had been living lately, and he'd been lying when he told his father he'd find the killers. He'd already found the culprit. 240. Only a few days ago, he had been sitting in a railroad car, stunned by what he had learned. 241. After being in the small town for only a short time, he discovered not only the motives behind the crime he had committed, but also looked into the eyes of the person who hated Maggie. It was a woman. Surely, after all, men were favorably disposed toward the voluptuous woman. Perhaps some would like to put her in her place for her willfulness and rebelliousness. But to kill. 242. At the train station, Edie learned that Maggie had traveled to the village of Inske on false documents. The investigation was aided by the photos of the girl, which Edie had kept since they had known each other. 243. The curly, lush blonde was happy to tell him that a local celebrity courtesan had bought a ticket from her. Only, according to her, it was Vivian. Everyone knew her here, and the young woman attracted suitors from all. 244. As soon as the expensive foreign car sped down the streets, everyone knew in which yard it would stop. Vivian rented a comfortable private house in the town, with a well-maintained yard and modern renovations. She never liked to do housework, so she had a housekeeper. Edie found her on the next street over. 245. A thin woman in her 50s, with traces of her former beauty on her face, told him that, according to her information, Vivian had gone to the city to see an old friend. To his delight, she told him her first and last. Edie shuddered. The name Natalie White had often been on Maggie's tongue when they lived together. The girl had spent evenings with her in the hot spots. She said she was a classmate of hers. 246. That's right, her number was saved in the phone. Without thinking, Smith Jr. dialed it. Natalie picked up the phone and immediately gasped. saying how long it had been since she'd heard from him. 247. I went to the sea, she boasted. 248. Good for you, alone. 249. Alone. Maggie didn't want to come with me. 250. So have you two met in town recently? 251. Yeah, we met the night before I left. We went to a bar. We had a great time, just like when we were young. She never stopped loving you. She kept asking me if I knew anything. 252. Okay, well, I'll call you again if you need me. 253. Okay, I'm on the phone, but let me ask you what you're calling for. You looking for a contact, like old love never withers? You want to find her? 254. No, I'll explain it all to you sometime later. 255. Later means never. Natalie sighed sadly. I know you men. 256. Do you still live there or did you move somewhere else? 257. But none of the handsome guys like you asked me to marry, so I'm still hanging around with my parents. Why don't we get together? I'll be back in 2 days. 258. I'll think about it. I'll call you. Bye, Natalie. 259. After this conversation, Edie decided to have a conversation with White's parents. 260. They were extremely surprised by his questions about his daughter and her friendship with Maggie. Although they were happy to make contact with the local newspaper reporter, Edie showed them his ID. 261. They calmly told us that their daughter is now on vacation at the Black Sea coast, that they'd been talking to Maggie since kindergarten, and then at school. Maggie left her mother. She ran away from her husband with another man. He brought her daughter up to speed. She finished school with his support and died. 262. And then through high school and beyond, the girlfriends never broke up. They were together all the time. It wasn't until 5 years ago that their paths diverged a little. Maggie moved away, and Natalie saw her less, then she stopped talking about her friend altogether. The Wyatts thought they'd had a fight, a falling out. 263. Eddie didn't tell them about Maggie's death. He just asked about mutual friends and took their contacts. 264. It was so strange to dig into the past of a woman who'd almost consumed him with her insane lust for passion. Turns out she'd been an instigator at school and a great student. Maggie began her hunt for the stronger sex while she was still in high school. 265. It was clear because the men who talked about her immediately revived face, eyes lit up, and palms covered with sweat. 266. Wow, it's been so many years and she still excites them just as much. Although, how long ago did I get rid of the perverse attraction myself? 267. The more people Edie interviewed, the more obvious it became that Maggie and Natalie were, in fact, thick as thieves. 268. People were sure to characterize their friendship. 269. It was a strange relationship, said Vanessa, a classmate, a full-figured red-headed girl walking with a stroller in the park. 270. Edie became curious as to what she meant. 271. Why do you have that opinion? 272. Well, Maggie always liked to take charge, and in junior high, she had girlfriends who obeyed her, and then Natalie outshone everyone else. She's always seemed complicated. She's quiet, but she gets her way. So she pushed Maggie around, and soon she became an indispensable friend, kind of beat everyone back. Kicked out all the people who'd been with Maggie before, didn't tolerate competition. She was arrogant and prideful with us, and everyone liked Maggie. She was outgoing and generous. We all thought they'd split up after high school because it was hard to understand how such different girls could be friends for so many years. But White didn't let Maggie get her claws in Maggie. 273. Do you think she wanted a strong relationship with Maggie? 274. It's hard to figure out. She's a very murky lady. 275. The last person Edie interviewed was Jack. According to the information he'd gathered earlier, he was madly in love with Natalie. Edie looked with interest at the man who could resist Maggie and chose her friend. 276. They met outside the city hall. A short, stocky man came up to Eddie and shook his hand firmly. 277. Why do you ask about them? Jacques wondered, talking about how he had perceived the girl's friendship during his school years. 278. He scratched the back of his head, saw them together once. They were chirping away. They didn't even notice me even though I was close by. I thought, wow, I don't have feelings for Natalie anymore, and I've forgiven Maggie. It's all in the past for me, and they continue to have a strong friendship. 279. Forgiven for what? Edie perked up. 280. So she wouldn't let Natalie go out with me. She basically lied to me. Told her that we slept together, and I told her I loved her, when in fact we didn't. 281. Tell me, Jacques, why didn't you? Because Maggie's so beautiful. Men were crazy about her. 282. I'm just not my type. I don't like predators. The young man smiled. 283. I see. Well, thank you for the information and appreciation of those long ago events. 284. So, are you going to tell me what happened? 285. Maggie was killed by someone, and by the looks of it, one of their own. 286. Horrible, of course. Jacques spread his hands. Though she was a bitch, she didn't deserve to die. 287. Yeah, I don't think anyone would kill her for manipulating other people's feelings, but you'd have to hate her a lot. I haven't come across any Eddie reasoned. 288. But it's a good thing I didn't kill her, he thought. And somehow she was more sympathetic in class, more so than Natalie. She was disliked and forgiven a lot, but only because she was Maggie's favorite. She even complained to me once that she was fed up with the role and wanted to step out of her friend's shadow. But then we had a conflict, and I don't know about the further development of events. 289. Edie was suddenly alarmed by this information. Natalie hadn't struck him as a loyal friend before. Even though he'd seen her several times, his intuition told him that her innocent appearance hid noble motives. 290. He decided for himself that he would meet her at the station and talk to her in person. 291. Edie called her back and played the interested date card. To his surprise, White was delighted, and she blatantly started hitting on him. 292. Where are we going to go with you afterward? Will you get a hotel? The girl purred into the phone. 293. Don't get ahead of yourself, Nada. Let's do this in order. First, I'll feed you at the restaurant, and then I'll warm you up in bed. 294. Whatever you say, she agreed. 295. Edie shared his plan with Tyler. They met in the evening in the city park. 296. If she's Maggie's killer, there's nothing to stop her. Make sure she doesn't give you clofaline. Criminals rarely change their MO. A girl might realize you suspect her, and Natalie's openness to intimacy could be, I'll get a room near you. Put my cops on you. 297. Greg, that's not necessary. I can't handle a girl. 298. Trust me, Edie, in the criminal world, a lot of people put on the guise of decency and appear weak. In reality, they're usually unscrupulous and ruthless. 299. Well, all right, Smith Jr. agreed, and the boys left. Edie to the hotel and the policeman to the police station. He still had to study a lot of information on the case and formalize it properly. 300. A day later, Tyler revealed to Edie the new facts that his co-workers had dug up at White's place of residence. 301. Edie had no sooner finished his morning coffee in the hotel restaurant than the name Greg popped up on his phone. 302. Edie, I was right. Anyway, at the hospital where our suspect works, 6 young women died in a month on her shift. Clofaline overdoses. Blamed it on them, like they didn't follow their doctor's orders. Convenient. The victims were being treated for hypertension. 303. Where did they get it from? 304. Oh, in this day and age, diseases are getting younger. What kind of nutrition? And the stress, the sleep deprivation, the frantic pace of life. 305. So why was she taking their lives? What were her motives? Or 306. I don't know that yet. 377. In the evening, Edie's phone was ringing off the hook. It was Natalie's attack. 308. Edie, I want to go straight to my room. I'm out of the way. Freshen up, get dressed up. You want to get a room, or should I go to yours? 309. Into mine. He pretended to give up. 310. The train arrived on schedule. Natalie jumped off the train, happy and cheerful. She gave Smith a hug and handed him the bag with his things. 311. Oh, it was so smothering in the car, White shared. I didn't sleep a wink all night. 312. She looked adoringly at the boy, flapping her long eyelashes. She seemed to be a naive and pure girl in front of him. Her gentle gaze, wavy blonde hair, clear blue eyes, and open smile confused Edie. What kind of sneaky killer was she? Sneaky in her own mind, maybe, but not smart, clucking at 313. He put his arm around the girl's frail shoulders. 314. You'll sleep now. The room is air-conditioned. It's cool. 315. There, Natalie showered, changed, tidied up, and only then went down to the restaurant with Edie. 316. Greg was in the neighborhood. He got a text message from Smith Jr. and broke into the room. 317. There was a gym bag on the floor and things scattered on the bed. His keen gaze stopped on a very expensive purse on the nightstand. It was impossible to buy one on a nurse's salary. Greg opened it carefully and examined the contents. He found a vial of clofulane. Well, of course, though it doesn't mean anything yet. 318. Edie was staring at his companion. She was far from Maggie, of course, but she was not unattractive. She was short, blonde, and pretty. He glanced at her slender calves and double eyes, saw a scar around her ankle that had healed, but appeared to be recent. It was still pink, healed a few days ago. When Natalie noticed his gaze, she tucked her legs under the chair. 319. Why are you hiding your pretty legs from me if you're going to give yourself to me? Edie got himself together. 320. Oh, that's me. I had a friend who was too pretty and everyone paid attention to her exclusively, so I'm still complex. 321 flashed through Edie's mind. 322. Although I've learned to love myself, the girl continued. 323. Did Maggie call you while you were at sea? 324. No. Well, she's probably out there in her own town. 325. And did it ever occur to you to ask how your friend was doing? 326. Oh, come on, Edie. Like you don't know how stiff she is. She only communicates when she wants to. I'm used to it, and I don't take any unnecessary steps in that direction. Well, I knew you weren't interested in me, but in your ex-girlfriend. The girl was getting angry. 327. Edie filled his glass with the sizzling drink and looked at Natalie into 328. Jealous. You're wrong. Maggie's been over for a long time. You can't live a human life with someone like her. You become a slave. 329. How sad you sound. And look now, White said. You loved her after all. 330. I was sick of her, the boy replied. That's more accurate. It's not love. It's an addiction. You'll need your strength tonight, he said, winking at the girl. 331. After dinner, the couple returned to the room. Edie skillfully feigned passion and violently took Natalie. 332. After the intimacy, the girl completely melted. She was lounging in his arms and smiling blissfully. 333. I've never had such intimacy. You're an exceptional lover, she whispered softly. 334. I might be, Edie chuckled, but that's the kind of thing you can't praise yourself. No one will. Natalie, on the other hand, could learn from her friend how to get men. A completely mediocre woman. But the goal has been achieved. Mademoiselle is relaxed and unsuspecting. 335. Indeed, she gave the impression of a carefree and happy woman, so the appearance on Greg's doorstep, with an ID card in her hands, was a complete surprise to her. Where is your friend Maggie, with whom you had lunch together on June 16th at 20:00 at the Oasis restaurant? And where were you at 20:30 when she was killed? Whose purse do you have? 337. Edie joined in the questioning. 338. Tell me how you got that wound on your foot. Was it from Marina's stiletto heels? 339. Guys, I don't understand what's going on, Natalie babbled. What are you interrogating me for? I was with my friend in a restaurant. So what? 340. You were the last person to see her alive, and then Maggie died. Tyler persisted. 341. EO, I didn't even know that. Natalie theatrically splayed her hands. I saw her alive and well. 342. Edie walked over to the table and took her purse from it. He went all in, at the risk of making a fool of himself. 343. Maggie came to see me this very afternoon with this purse. It belongs to her. 344. Natalie shrieked and started throwing her things and anything else she could get her hands on at the guys. 345. But Greg and Edie quickly dealt with the exposed fury. 346. Tyler duly charged her with murder, told her to change her clothes, take the essentials with her, and led her already handcuffed out into the street. There she got into the police car and immediately calmed down. She didn't scream anymore, just glared angrily at everyone around her. 347. Further interrogations of the girl showed that the friendship of the two was trouble for Maggie. Natalie was always possessed by an all-consuming envy and jealousy, so her friend accepted death from this feeling. 348. White's confession was scary. Tyler allowed his friend to be present, and he heard the whole story. 349. As soon as I saw Maggie in our class, I hated her. She didn't have to do anything to get attention. She had the male teachers and guys looking up to her. The girls loved her too. She was always generous and easy to talk to. 350. Yeah, Maggie was a bit of an idol. Everyone admired her. The way she talked, the way she dressed, the way she moved. Only no one could do it. She was the only one who had this inimitable animal magnetism. I was attracted to her too. Only it pissed me off and I resisted as much as I could. I wanted to be better than her and more interesting to others. Only time showed that it was her who had all their sympathies, fancy clothes, endless male attention. She'd give me something from her closet. I took it, how it pissed me off. To accept her rags, to be satisfied with the men she dumped. Was that fair? Back in high school, she broke up Jacques and me, the only guy who chose me over her. But she didn't want him. He wasn't her kind of guy, and he wasn't interested in her. So she couldn't let me be happy even for a little while. Your Maggie, she said to Edie, is a hellcat. It was important to her to possess everyone around her, and there was only one way to stop it. Wipe her off the face of the earth. 351. All I did was wait for the moment of vengeance. And it happened. I persuaded her to go to the seaside together, but to go to a restaurant beforehand. She was staying in a nice hotel in the city, while I was in a modest motel. 352. And then it's a matter of technique. I slipped her some clofelin, and when we were walking back through the vacant lot, she felt bad. Realizing she didn't have long to live, I told her the real reason for my behavior. Somehow, a weakening Maggie managed to stab me in the leg with her heel. Then, as she passed out, I pulled the plastic system out of my pack and pumped the blood out of her body. 353. I quickly covered it with cardboard boxes, grabbed my purse, and set off on my journey. I deserved it. I had plenty of money in Maggie's purse, enough for clothes, good food, and a rented place on the sea. 354. Well, tell me, darling, why did you kill so many women in the hospital? Greg asked. 355. And hearing them talk about how happy and prosperous their lives are, I was jealous. I was also experimenting with how much Maggie should be dosed. No one suspected me at all. 356. At the trial, Natalie White was smiling. It wasn't so much 15 years for sweet revenge for a hated friend. 357. Eddie wrote an interesting article and received a commendation from the editor-in-chief. He detailed the whole story to his father, concealing his and Maggie's past. Gradually, Smith's essay began to get better, and Lillian Watson came to visit. 358. The Smiths gradually forgot about their relationship with Maggie. It seemed that their lives had become calm and measured. But it was a deceptive impression. 359. One day, Edie had to go on a business trip, and his bus was involved in an accident. 360. He woke up to the touch of hot hands stroking his face. He opened his eyes, but he couldn't see the man's face. 361. In its place was a thick haze and a worried female voice. Apparently, it belonged to a young nurse. 362. Thank you, God. You're finally coming to your senses. That's good. Now, why don't you tell me about it? What's your name? Yeah, why am I interrogating you? I'll go get the doctor. 363. Eddie tried to make sense of what was happening. Came to my senses. Doctors, I'm in the hospital. Why? There's no picture of recent memories in my mind. My eyes hurt. I can't see anything. Where am I? 364. Look, Ireland, our John Doe is finally awake. 3L65. Good, that's good. He traveled so far without papers. He must have been in a hurry. So he's a fighter. He'll live on. Isn't that right, Sick? Can you hear me? What's your name? 366. Edie took a deep breath and his chest, squeezed in pain, tried to open his eyes. 367. What? It's dark like this," he whispered in a weakened voice. Edie I. Smith, 368. Eddie, huh? Where do you live? Do you remember? 369. The boy strained his memory, but couldn't remember anything about himself. A blank slate. It felt like he had started living today. He just mumbled, 370. "I don't know. I feel pain. My eyes. I can't see." 371. In this helpless position, Edie stayed in the hospital for more than 372. Unlike memory, my eyesight began to recover gradually. His physical well-being was also improving day by day, and his body was regaining its strength, despite the fact that the doctors quickly found out who he was and where he had come from. He himself was unable to reconstruct the former pictures of his life. 373. Greg and his father came to see him. They talked about what he'd been like as a young boy, but Edie just shrugged, his mind blank. 374. The doctor's explanation was that he had retrograde amnesia after the accident, and the state of oblivion could last a long time. 375. Edie had problems not only with his eyesight, but also with his musculoskeletal system. Multiple fractures meant that he could only walk with a cane. 376. His father took him home, and there Edie was deathly homesick. What to do? With his mind he could do everything, but his body was limited in movement. His own existence seemed meaningless to it. He looked at old photographs, listened to the stories of his father and friends, but his memory was as if in a thick fog. Some vague images and outlines disturbed him at night, but there was no clarity in them. 377. I began to read everything I could get my hands on: magazines, newspapers, books. I tried to find something familiar in professions, literature, art, but I could not find any signs of identification with anything. 378. And suddenly, I began to write stories, essays. Words literally poured out of his soul. That's how his fiction novels were born. But only his father and his friend Watson read. 379. One fine evening, on the street, Edie met a similarly distressed, older man. He'd been living without a past for 5 years, never remembered himself before the trauma. We got to talking. His wise musings on life were close. He even experienced a faint hope that the images of his former life would return again. Ease and pleasant communication brought the men closer together. And during the next meeting, they told each other about themselves. 380. Some raiders beat up Dan. A new acquaintance of Smith Jr. in broad daylight took away his lodging, gave him some money and a one-way ticket, threatening him not to tell anyone about the incident if he wanted to live, of course. 381. That's how he ended up in the city of Insk. 382. As long as I had money, I lived in hotels and ate in canteens. When I ran out of money, I found a modest place to live and got a job as a janitor in the same neighborhood. 383. Fate had decreed that both became lonely, unnecessary to society. Reading and a common view of many things brightened him. Early one morning, Edie came out to his yard. Dan waved to him. He was nimble with a broom. 384. It was already warm, for it was a hot summer. Smith sat down on a bench, waiting for his friend to come to him. Suddenly, he heard a sound like a cat meowing or a baby crying. I thought I heard it. 385. I turned around. Behind me, near the urn, I saw a child wrapped carelessly in a blanket. I quickly jumped up, picked up the bundle from the ground and pressed it against myself and rushed to the hospital. It was difficult to breathe and walk. The injuries were still making themselves felt, but he went forward fiercely. After all, it is necessary to have time to save the baby's life. 386. Did a mother's heart remain indifferent the moment she abandoned her child? Even animals don't do that to their offspring. 387. Ran to the nearest hospital. They took the baby to the children's hospital at once. They were surprised that Eddie, who was lame, had traveled more than 2 kilometers so quickly. 388. Back home, the boy told his father and his buddy Dan about the 389. Smiths are conned out, where the toddler was sent at his son's request. 390. Turns out he saved the girl. She was being treated at the Central Hospital. Eddie was very worried about her health, and with the help of Greg Tyler, who gave him a freelance police officer's license. He was able to visit the rescued child without hindrance. 391. The head of the department favored their meetings. When she heard that he was the one who had picked up the girl, she asked. 392. What would you like to name her? You're kind of her godfather now. 393. Kate. The name was pleasant to his mind. 394. It's a good name. The woman agreed. We'll make it so. 395. The foundling case went straight to Tyler's desk. 396. He tracked down the girl's mother, found her in the hospital. The story she told him was egregious, but it didn't justify what she did, morally or legally. 397. At the hospital, Edie immediately sought out the doctor who had treated the young woman. 398. Well, my little dove. The doctor looked at her with tired but kind eyes. I can say that it's practically a miracle. Multiple bruises, concussion, but there are no irreparable consequences. The girl is strong. She is on the good thing he didn't hit her in the stomach. So she gave birth to a live baby girl. She's been moved to a comfortable single room today, so you can question her. Reese likely. 399. Thank you, doctor. Edie thanked. And what room number is it? 400. DN33. The doctor replied. And thank you. He squinted slightly. Maybe you'll be able to get along with her. She says she doesn't remember anything, but as a doctor, I can see that there's nothing wrong with her memory. There are other motives for this silence. She should be punished. She can't go unpunished. 401. Before entering the girl's room, Eddie stomped around the door a bit. He didn't even feel like talking to one, but he knocked and heard a slightly hoarse, "Come in." In response. 402. The young woman looked bad in the daylight, but you could tell she had a pleasant appearance. Despite the large bruises on her face, Eddie realized that she was quite good-looking when healthy. Her appearance couldn't be called standard. She had a natural soft beauty. On her slender, narrow face, her large cornflower-colored eyes shone like two stars, framed by thick lashes. Her cheeks had dimples, and her thick blonde hair curled slightly. 403. Hello. I'm the investigator in charge of your case. Tell me how you left your daughter. 404. I don't remember. The girl mumbled embarrassedly. 405. This is all very, very curious. Well, what's your name? Do you remember? 406. Oberyn Anako, the girl blurted out and turned sharply away from the wall. 407. Edie asked her many questions, but she stubbornly said she had no recollection of the events surrounding the accident. The policeman slammed the door irritably and left the room. 408. But his stubbornness was to be envied, and he strove to bring open cases to a conclusion. A couple of days later, he returned and led the young woman into a frank conversation. 409. In fact, she only wanted to forget forever all her personal history that had led to such a violent outcome, starting from the moment she had first seen Kieran, her future husband. Their acquaintance had been very pleasant at first. He would beautifully, was caring, polite, and responsive to any request of the girl. 410. Oberyn grew up in an orphanage. She didn't remember her parents at all, and that's why she went to work right after graduating from 8th grade. 411. Oberyn and Kieran worked in the same chain store and were always in contact as colleagues. Oberyn was a novice, and he, on his own initiative, immediately took her under his supervision. Helped her with advice and guidance. They'd gotten close at one of the company holidays, when they'd escaped together from a long but boring banquet. That same night, Kieran kissed her as he walked her home. He courted her like a real gentleman, was very gallant, witty, gave small but nice gifts and flowers for no reason. 412. Before Oberyn knew it, she was in the registry office with him. And as soon as she became his wife, the good things in their relationship ended. First of all, her husband forbade her to work, then made a revision of her closet, threw out some of the things allegedly compromising the surname Anako. In the trash went short skirts and blouses with frank cleavage, lingerie, costume, jewelry, and even cosmetics. 413. Then Kieran started disappearing at night and spending his money lavishly in the casino. He wouldn't let Jax go to the nearest store, kept him locked up. He locked the apartment when he went to work or to a nightclub. He would make scandals if she painted her lips without his permission, tearing her underwear and throwing her things off the balcony, accusing her of lewd behavior. 414. Kieran constantly humiliated his wife, tried to hurt her with words, reproached her with a piece of bread. At the moment, when a pouty and mentally gutted Oberyn decided to leave her husband, she was horrified to realize that she was pregnant by him. The day she told her husband this, he beat her for the first time, deciding that the child was not his. 415. Then the beatings became regular and more prolonged. Saving her unborn child, the young woman managed to escape through the back door of the women's clinic during a routine appointment to which Kieran accompanied her. She had her documents and some personal savings with her. A few days later, her husband found her in the apartment of a close friend from boarding school, beat her severely, forced her into a car and drove her into the woods. At first, he probably wanted to burn her because he doused her with gasoline. But then he just hit her over the head with a heavy board and left her there. She heard her husband cursing her and wishing her dead. Gathering her last strength, she climbed out of the forest slum for several days. How she did it, she did not know. Ragged, hungry, beaten. And yet she did not report her husband. After the hospital, she wandered around among acquaintances. Her husband didn't look for her, thinking she had died in the forest. 416. Oberyn realized that if he knew she was alive, he would hunt her down and beat her to death sooner or later. She was afraid for herself and the baby, so she decided to keep it a secret until the birth. Afterward, she dropped the baby off where Edie found it. 417. Edie silently wrote down her statement. 418. You don't want your daughter back? He asked. 419. No, the woman cried. 420. She refused to give her up on the grounds that her husband would kill the baby girl, along with her. 421. Greg prosecuted both of them. They were convicted and sent to juvie. Both spouses died there under unclear circumstances. 422. The girl was orphaned while her parents were still alive. Only Eddie couldn't leave the infirm child. He was attached to the girl with all his soul. He knew a lot about her, how much she ate, how she slept when she cried. 423. When the baby got stronger, she was moved to the infant home. Eddie got a job there as a watchman. He stayed there for 6 months, near his goddaughter. 424. The girl grew up before his eyes. When she began to take her first steps, the boy began to seek permission to adopt her. 425. I came back to the editorial office. True, he literally started from scratch, but his work was going well, and within a few months he had restored his reputation as the best journalist. 426. Life had given Edie a gift. Though he had lost his memory, he was now a father. He'd been given a little girl to raise. He became her legal guardian. 427. An important goal emerged: a daughter. Her father helped raise her and was thrilled with his granddaughter. He found faith in himself too. He settled down. Raising a baby girl 2 men was not easy, but they put in it all the love and tenderness that they were capable of. Grew up with her from diapers to school. 428. Really loved Kate. The kind of unconditional, immeasurable love that elevates a man above the ordinary. Their hearts were filled with unselfish, pure thoughts. The little girl was able to give them true happiness. 429. Only there was no mistress in the Smith house, and when it seemed that all hope was lost, fate gave Edie another chance for personal well-being. 430. A beautiful, statuesque, neatly coiffed, red-haired girl sat in the carriage of a fast train and leisurely drank hot sweet tea. The rhythmic clatter of the wheels flashed in Kate's mind as images of the recent past flashed through her mind. The bustling capital, its noisy highways and bright night lights were left behind. Her soul was longing for the long-awaited meeting with her native land, cozy home and caring mother. 431. She lay down. Dreama quickly came upon and enveloped the girl's consciousness, and she instantly fell into a deep sleep. 432. I awoke to the unceremonious shouting of the conductor. 433. Citizens, passengers, wake up. The train is arriving at the station in parking 3 minutes. 434. Kate shook off the unpleasant stupor caused by sleep and quickly packed her things into her gym bag. The cityscapes flashed outside the window and the train began to slow down. 435. Kate stepped out of the carriage in the late afternoon. Though it was still light, the station was empty. Only a few faces glimpsed through the station window and then disappeared. 436. The girl looked around and breathed a full sigh. It had been a long time since she had been to INS 437. I went on my way home, plunging into the past, into my childhood and youth. She remembered how she jumped on the sleepers and received a reprimand from her mother for such behavior. But this did not stop the girl, and right on the platform, together with her friend, Kate drew squares and played classics. However, the station duty officer dispersed them, explaining that it was dangerous. 438. And here's a bench with a comfortable backrest. Special, wonderful, memorable. How many girls' secrets she knows. 439. Kate sat down, her hand gently stroking the roughness of the peeling plank. There was the inscription, still intact. ATE. Greg had done it. He was in love with her, and she sympathized with Edie. Now, Greg wasn't the last man in Inski. She'd read E's article about his investigation of a terrible crime in the city, and it was committed by a girl out for revenge. What a terrible, soul-crushing feeling. 440. Kate had been friends with Edie since she was 5. She'd run to their house for sweet cakes from Grandma Vivi. The boy's father was doing time. You can't even show him to Kate now. She wouldn't remember. She'd seen him a couple of times when he'd come home from time served. But then all of Edie's friends had been asked to go home. And Grandma Valia cried, wiping her face with her apron and kissing her son on the top of his head. 441. Then they would climb the apple tree in their garden, playing hide and seek and chase. Greg often joined them. He was a terrible thug and a brawler when he was a boy. 442. We used to walk to school together through a little wooded area. It wasn't scary that way. After school, we would walk to the playground, throwing our briefcases in a pile. 443. Her father could take them for a ride on his motorcycle on a summer evening if the mood took him. Kate thought that even now she felt the jolt and Greg clinging to her with every fiber of her being and every cell of her body, as she had once felt in the cradle of that motorcycle. Edie was fine, the tallest man in the saddle, behind his father. 444. Kate liked going to school. She was good at the exact sciences, math, physics, chemistry. But she was especially excited to learn the basics of biology. She easily grasped the laws of development of living nature, learning about the unique processes that trigger the mechanisms of life at the cellular level. She liked to learn the physiology and anatomy of the human body. That's why she wanted to become a doctor at the age of 10. And in her youth, after reading Mikhail Bulgakov's novel Notes of a Young Doctor, the girl was finally confirmed in her desire. 445. Despite the fact that Kate had few illnesses and almost no contact with doctors in her childhood, the atmosphere described in the books was intrinsically close to her. Already as a girl, she was ready for responsibility for someone else's life, and she treated all abandoned cats and dogs. She was interested in learning all the subtleties of this craft. 446. And another incident from her own life prompted her to choose her future profession. One day she cut herself and got a pustule on her leg. Her mother took her to see a surgeon. 447. He, of course, prescribed treatment and dressings, and the girl often had to visit the children's polyclinic. She liked everything there: cleanliness, medicinal odor, white coats, and friendly nurses. 448. Afterwards, already in high school, the same surgeon came to their classes and told them about his profession. 449. After his speech, the desire to give herself to this craft only strengthened. Perhaps it was the finger of fate, because even now she did not regret her decision. That she chose the path of a doctor, but she really wanted to devote herself to children. Therefore, after the 3rd year of study, she went into pediatrics. 450. And when the practice began on duty at the hospital, the girl realized that she had chosen a profession to her liking. She had very good supervisors who saw in her the future luminary of pediatrics. This, of course, was presented by them as irony, but Kate, indeed, fell into the hands of a unique specialist. Her mentor was a thoughtful doctor, teaching her to reason, analyze disease symptomatology, and think clinically, to see nuances in practice that were not taught in textbooks. That's why Kate was drawn to this hospital. She was trusted there as if she was already a doctor. 451. In the internship, already after she received a diploma of a doctor, the girl worked on the profile. 452. She especially enjoyed her days when the venerable doctors went on vacation and duty became her own. 453. Then immediately felt the increased responsibility, because under all the documents was not the name of the mentor, but her own. 454. In general, she had no regrets about her choice. Professionally, she was growing, gaining experience, and was satisfied with everything. But her personal life didn't work out. No, there were plenty of suitors, but only her. 455. Kate's memories were interrupted. Her mother, anxious and aged, was running toward her across the track. For sixes. 456. Kate, what are you doing? I meet you on the platform in. 457. Don't worry, Mommy. I've been raiding the memory lane. Didn't you say you couldn't make it? The girl rushed to hug her. 458. But my worker didn't come. We can't close the hole in the fence. Vasilchikov got drunk. 459. Taking her mother's hand in hers, Kate smiled broadly. Her mother had changed, but she still smelled the same, like herbs and melted milk. 460. Mom, home. It's peaceful, not like the frantic, ignoring the precious pleasures of life. Chicago. Everybody's flying around like crazy. There's a stamp of universal importance on their faces and indifference in their eyes. What can you do? The rhythm of the capital. 461. And at home, everything was the same as before. The same curtains, perfect cleanliness. The smell of freshly cooked, freshly made soup was amazing. 462. It's still the same. 463. What could change? As if hearing her daughter's thoughts, Peggy replies, It's just that there's no man in the house. It's hard to manage on my own, but I don't need anyone after your father. When you're rested, we'll go and see him. I've cleaned up his grave. 464. Mom, do Uncle Jax and Aunt Sarah Tyler still live in New York? 465. Where are they gonna go? Everything suits them. The capital doesn't beckon with its lights. We pensioners have our own life, a measured one. Gardens, vegetable gardens. It's in the center, the Smiths' Palaces. 466. Are they here? Kate asked excitedly. 467. Yes. The woman breathed, covering her mouth with her hand. 468. Kate looked at her mother's changed face. 469. What is it? 470. Eddie's also in the newsroom. Greg's left the past behind. He's working as a caretaker at an orphanage. That's where Eddie worked while he was taking care of the rescued girl. 471. What girl? 472. Okay, everyone here knows the story. I didn't tell you. You were so fond of him when you were young, and he forgot all about you when his stepmother came into the house. How you were tormented then. I knew we were no match for him. She must have forbidden him to be with you. 473. Wow, Kate marveled. 474. Not married, Peggy added hastily. He lost his memory after the accident, and he can't remember a thing. 475. Tears came to Kate's eyes. 476. What's a guy like that for? What's a guy like that for? 477. After this message, the girl barely touched her mother's fragrant soup. She ate slowly and without appetite. She wanted to be alone. The news was too sad. 478. Kate got up from the table. 479. Thanks, Mom. Not a soup, but a culinary masterpiece. 480. You've barely touched this masterpiece, the girl's mother sighed. 481. Yeah, I've been so excited with all this going on. I'm going to walk to our 482. Well, go on, Kate. You might find your heart at home. 483. As soon as the door slammed behind her daughter, Peggy sank tiredly into a chair. 484. Would Kate have left here if it hadn't been for her unhappy love? Edie was the only thing she'd breathed since she was a little girl, and everything was going so well for them. And then it was like a whisper, just passing by like a stranger. He had his eye on. I could see it. I'm a good judge of that sort of thing. I had a feeling. It broke off like a book about the Snow Queen, as if the guy's heart had been frozen by a piece of ice. 485. Kate walked on, breathing in the fresh air. Grasshoppers chirped happily, birds sang in different voices, and the wind swayed the majestic crowns of the trees. 486. When I heard the cuckoo, I stopped. I decided to try a game like when I was a kid. If the cuckooing is even, then the wish will come true. 487. I'm gonna make a wish to meet the person I'm thinking about. 488. I looked around. No one. The old game didn't work. It made her sad. It brought back memories. 489. She didn't realize that the object of her thoughts was now moving toward her. 5 minutes later, they bumped into each other on the forest path. 490. He gazed intently at the young woman. Suddenly, like a flash, like an epiphany, all the stories his father and Greg had told him about his life came alive. They sparkled with warmth and vibrancy, and he realized why he'd given his daughter that name. Because his relationship with Kate was the purest page of his destiny. You could remember them countless times. They were warming, joyful, endearing. 491. Memory reverberated back to the days of his happy youth. 492. Smith and Kate, I'm telling you one more time, if you don't stop making noise immediately, I'm kicking you out of class. I urge you to focus your attention. Final exams are coming up. Giselle, the physics teacher, fixed her glasses, which had slipped down to the tip of her nose, and continued her explanation of the new topic. 493. The door ajar, the chest, and then the bulky body of Tati, the headmistress, slowly floated into the classroom. 494. Excuse us a moment, Giselle. She walked to the back of the room. 495. I caught Tyler in the courtyard, she said to the students and pointed to Greg, who had entered with her. Please love him. I'm taking control of him from today. If you skip school, you'll have to deal with me. 496. Tyler said hello, looked around at his classmates carefully, and made his way to a vacant back desk. 497. Well, you're a fruit. 80 winked at his friend. 498. The man shrugged indifferently and nodded to Kate. 499. A couple days later, as a May thunderstorm rumbled outside the window, the Tyler family was preparing for their son's coming of age. 500. A stately black-haired woman was setting the table. In the kitchen, a handsome man with a somewhat sly expression was watching the game cooking, and he carefully opened the cupboard door, filled his glass once more, and sat down at the kitchen table, sipping the amber drink with pleasure. 501. Greg walked out of his bedroom and into the hall. Zara stopped setting the dishes on the table and looked thoughtfully at her son. How quickly time had flown by. He was a baby, and now he was a grown-up boy. She slowly sat down on a stool, tears welling up in her eyes. 502. Greg, you're all grown up. You'll graduate from high school and go into the army, she said quietly and sobbed. 503. Mom, stop getting wet. He hugged his mother and gently wiped her wet cheek. 504. The doorbell rang. Zara fidgeted at the table. Edie's shining face appeared in the doorway. He came in and looked at his friend appraisingly. 505. Well, you're dressed up, he commented on Kieran Tyler's stern new Kieran. 506. Sheesh. Greg put his index finger to his lips. Now my parents will leave. I'll change my clothes, he explained. I don't want to offend them. 507. Edie nodded understandingly. 508. How's the chicken? Zara shouted toward the kitchen. 509. When Jax heard his wife's voice, he scurried around the kitchen with the glass in his hand. Finally, he placed it behind a flower pot on the windowsill and went into the hall. His wife looked up at him. 510. Yes, ready for the game, she stated. 511. Jacques shrugged and stepped aside to let his wife into the kitchen. She opened the oven, pulled out a baking tray, and the chicken crusted pinkish brown. The sweet smell of meat and spices filled the room. 512. It's ready. She turned off the stove, then took an empty bottle from the cupboard and silently handed it to her husband. 513. You guys, she said to Edie and Greg, you can make your own mashed potatoes. If you're going to be leaving, give us a call. She opened the door and walked out of the house. 514. Zara, her husband, called out to her. 515. What? She turned around. 516. I forgot to take off my apron. 517. Zara laughed, took off her apron, and threw it over her husband's head toward the grinning boys. Edie caught it deftly on the fly. 518. Soon the cake arrived with the delivery. Greg bowed theatrically as he had. 519. Thank you heartily for such a yummy birthday gift for my best friend. 520. So be it. the candy store clerk said in a daze and hurriedly closed the front door. 521. The boys went back to the apartment. Greg went into the hall and put the cake on the coffee table near the window. Then he drained the water from the potatoes. 522. You go mash the potatoes, he called to Smith, and I'll go and change my clothes. 523. Whistling a rhythmic tune under his breath, Edie smoothly opened the refrigerator, pulled out milk and butter, and immersed himself in the process of making mashed potatoes. 524. When the dish was ready, he wrapped the pot tightly in a terry towel, grinned contentedly, and headed for his friend's room. Greg had already changed into a dark blue sweater and tight blue jeans, and he was pulling 2 half-liter bottles out from under the couch with a triumphant look. Edie whistled happily. 525. And I thought I'd have to settle for a light one. How did you do it? 526. Your father showed solidarity. Greg held out the bottles to Edie. 527. Yeah, he's the world's man when it comes to entertainment. Edie winked at his friend, walked to the lounge, and placed the bottles on the table. 528. The bell rang insistently. Greg went to the front door and opened. 529. From the threshold, the guests gave a friendly shout. 530. Happy birthday. Happy birthday. 531. Thank you, Greg bowed jokingly. Roll up. 532. The noisy crowd could barely fit in the narrow hallway, and Greg went straight to the tall, slender brunette, Sarah. He helped her take off her windbreaker, placed it on the rack, and sat down, carefully removing her shoes from her classmates' flawless feet. Tilting her head back slightly, Sarah laughed contentedly. As Greg stood up, she wrapped her arms around his waist and lightly touched his cheek with her lips. Then she opened her arms and confidently took him under her arm, and they walked to the table. 533. Edie took the clothes from his companions, Nikki, Nate, and Sam. He looked around at the full rack, then went into the bedroom, stacked the jackets on the couch, and returned to the guests. They were rattling their plates, pouring themselves cold appetizers. 534. Greg was pouring liquor when the doorbell rang again. 535. Edie's favorite swan finally showed up. I don't really like her. I only invited her for a friend. 536. Oh, you're lying. I wouldn't mind going with her myself. Sarah grinned, flipping her leg over her foot with feline grace. 537. Yes, she cast a sly glance at Edie. 538. He took his time opening it. Greg patted him on the shoulder. 539. Shall I open it? 540. Smith waved his head negatively and headed for the front door himself. It really was Kate. 541. Happy birthday, Greg. She wished Tyler a happy birthday. You don't mind my company, do you? 542. No, he smiled. Come on in. You can undress in my room. He nodded guiltily toward the coat rack and strode toward the bedroom. Edie will show you out. The girl nodded and followed Smith. 543. The room was in semi-darkness. Edie held out his hands to help the girl remove her cloak. 544. She threw it off in a familiar motion and laid it on the back of the couch. 545. Shall we go to all of them? 546. Yes. 547. 12 pairs of eyes, hand in hand. They appeared in the doorway. The room was silent for a moment. Greg flew over to Kate and pulled her to the table, seating her beside him. 548. Edie sat down next to Sarah, across from them. 549. So Tyler got up from his seat. Finally, everyone is here, so let's have a toast to my coming of age. And wish me a happy birthday. 550. Happy birthday. The guests joined in. A happy birthday. 551. In the midst of the fun, Sarah, dancing with Greg, watched Kate from over his shoulder. She was starting to annoy her. 552. Not perfect, of course, but there's something about her, she pondered. The way the boys stare at her, they'll soon break their eyes. Beautiful thick hair, golden in color, slightly wavy, falling below her shoulders. She's not badly built, but she's clumsy. I'm much more graceful. The dress is not bad. Straight, monochrome, khaki color favorably shades the color of the eyes. Breasts in the neckline that is necessary. Can I say she's got taste? Her legs, yes, slender, but mine are longer and much prettier. 553. Her eyes are gray or gray-green, almond-shaped. and she's resting here. They're like huge lakes you could drown. Yes, but the look, what a look she has. Caressing, exciting, sensual. Her skin is as pale as milk. Her lips are very beautiful, medium-sized, properly shaped. Straight nose, sharp chin with a dimple. Still, she is very attractive. Svetlana pressed her lips together resentfully. 505-4. My queen is frowning. Greg kissed her earlobe and whispered, You're the most beautiful. She's a long way from you. He nodded toward 555. Swan shuddered, ran her thin fingers through Greg's thick hair, looked into his mesmerizing black eyes. 556. And you know everything about me. She wrapped her arms around his neck and kissed him gratefully. 557. He answered the girl, but he himself furtively still admired Kate. 558. Oh my. She was a little wretch, and now she's blossomed. A nice, appetizing young girl, but she's too right. What can I do with her? 559. Eddie couldn't get enough of the girl. They'd been together since childhood, but only recently had he realized what she'd become to him. 560. Her sparkling eyes, open smile, infectious laughter, literally everything about her seemed warm and native to him. He stood up and invited Merkulova to dance, but the melody suddenly ended. 561. Greg quickly jumped to the music center, set a new track, and the music spilled into the room with a languid languor, drowning out human voices. 562. Edie hugged Kate, her closeness making him feel infinitely happy. She pushed back the hair that fell over her face. 563. Edie said, a little audibly. 564. Your hair smells like summer grass. 565. Really? She looked embarrassed. You don't like it? 566. No, not at all. He gently touched her lush curls with his hand. I like it, even a lot. 567. The girl laughed softly, and Edie felt her relax in his arms. 568. Sarah swayed to the beat of the music, rolling a delicious pink apple in the palm of her hand. She looked at Edie and Kate and smiled contentedly. The feeling between them pleased her. 569. Sure, Eddie is a prominent guy, handsome, with a charming smile and alluring tiger eyes. He was an object of attention for the opposite sex. But Greg had been her loyal admirer for years, and his looks were She looked in his direction, tall, slender, with perfect facial features. He feels every movement of my soul. 570. A smile played on his face, and he got up from his chair, walked over, touched my neck, and gently ran his fingers through my hair. There's no peace with Greg. Girls go crazy for him. And I'm in love with his searing black eyes and raven wing hair, his humor, his plasticity. Yes, I'll tear anyone apart if she wants to take him away from me. Katya? Well, here, we've got her out of here. But I must confess, even to myself, that she's a good girl. 571. Swan threw her arms around Greg and pressed herself against him, a small shiver shaking her body. Abruptly, she pulled away and took a big bite of apple, droplets of juice on her plump lips. Sarah looked up at Greg, the fires of fierce, all-consuming passion dancing in her blue eyes. 572. The music ended. Edie and Kate stood in the middle of the room, unable to tear themselves away from each other. Then they sat down at the table, and without paying attention to the people around them, they enjoyed each other's company for the rest of the 573. By midnight, the guests began to disperse. Greg, who had been drinking heavily, walked over to Kate and took her hand. 574. I've decided to walk you out after all, baby. He staggered slightly, looking questioningly into her eyes. 575. The girl gently withdrew his hand and waved her head negatively. 576. No, I'm with Edie. 577. Let's go. Retired, Sarah chuckled, holding out her jacket to him. 578. Greg slung her over his shoulder, clapped his friend below his back with a loose clap, and followed the others out into the street. 579. Edie helped Kate put on her cloak, and they went downstairs. 580. The street smelled of rain and spring freshness. The girl took Smith under her arm. 581. If we turn down that alley, she held out her hand. We'll be at my house in 10 minutes. 582. I know a longer way. Eddie winked at Kate, Normal heroes always take a detour. 583. She laughed. All the way they chatted, and Eddie caught himself thinking that he was at ease with this girl. Carefree, simple, heartfelt. 504. And that happiness didn't last long. For then Maggie burst into his life. She enveloped him in a vicious passion. She stole his father and his only love. 585. Kate, of course, left town in a hurry. Went to Chicago, went to medical school there. Anyway, he lost her. 586. Along with the happy memories. Edie was flooded with the dark past, the time he'd spent with Maggie. He couldn't think of it now without revulsion. Away. He didn't want to drown in it again. 587. He was admiring Kate. She hasn't changed a bit. Even better. He came closer. Her hair smelled the same. Her eyes looking at him with the same love. No, it can't be. Am I dreaming? 588. I'm here for 3 days. I haven't been here in almost 4 years. My mom was scolded. How are you doing? Kate pretended not to know about Edie's problems. 589. And he acted like he didn't have a memory lapse. 590. It's nothing. Come on, let's go for a walk. I live with my father in here. I have a daughter and he has a granddaughter. 591. I've heard a lot about this story. It's horrible. Good for you. You did the honorable thing. 592. You know, the we're responsible for those we tame principle. 593. What's her name? 594. Kate, for 595. Oh, great. So we're namesakes. For 596. Uh-huh. Edie smiled. For 597. Would you introduce me? 598. That's the way to do it. 599. They walked hand in hand for a long time, as they used to do in their childhood and youth. They remembered a lot, laughed a lot. They laughed especially about the way he used to walk her home, taking the long way home so that he could stay with her long. 600. Kate noticed that Edie was limping, but still didn't ask anything. He opened up on his own. He told her how he had miraculously survived the accident, how he'd been in the hospital for a long time, and then spent a year recovering. With pain in his voice, told about how he found the girl. And then suddenly he asked. 601. Tell me, are you married? 602. No, Kate laughed. I haven't met anyone like you, and blushed. 603. Edie pretended not to notice the girl's embarrassment and, hiding his excitement, said goodbye at her house. 604. Well, bye, okay. I'll see you later. Are you coming to meet your namesake? I see your mom watching from the window like when I was young. 605. Of course I will. Yeah, my mom's a Sherlock Holmes in a skirt. Bye. 606. Despite her road weariness and the joy of seeing Smith, Kate lay awake all night. Thoughts swirled endlessly in her head. How could it be that their paths had diverged in high school? Why had he become indifferent? After all, even now it was obvious that he needed her. 607. She felt that Edie truly loved her. How his eyes shone with happiness today. You can't hide it. Yes, he did. He'd gotten his memory back in one fell swoop as soon as he saw her. That means something, doesn't it? 608. And her. Oh, she wanted a confession, but it didn't happen. Something unknown to her had happened in the past, and today he'd remained silent. 609. For the next 2 days, the old friends were inseparable. Little Kate joined their company. They took long walks in the forest belt, picked strawberries, counted cuckoo cries, and laughed together. They were good together as they had been long ago in their school days. 610. Edie's daughter felt at ease in this atmosphere, as if she were in the company of her peers. But it was. Edie and Kate were immersed in their happy childhood. 611. Kate's mother shook her head when her daughter came home for a snack, and when she was about to see her off on the night train and heard that Edie was going to do it, she was a little offended. But only a little, because she understood. 612. They stood on the platform, hushed, watching the approaching train. Kate's heart plummeted, and she wrapped her arms around Edie's neck. 613. I've always loved you. Alone. 614. Eddie kissed her back, long and tender. 615. I know, kitten, me too. I'm just realizing it now. I guess it's too late, huh? 616. Kate said nothing to him. She got on the carriage, all pissed off, and returned to the capital. 617. But nothing went well for her there. And a month later, she was on her way back to 618. As the train pulled into her childhood station, she saw a man sitting on the same bench with the cute Kate Eddie sign on it. Taking a closer look, Edie, jumping down from the step of the carriage, she rushed towards him, and he, limping slightly, rushed toward her. 619. You haven't left here in a month. The girl whispered in his ear. 620. Yeah, I've been waiting. He laughed and hugged Kate tightly. I felt today that you would come back. I won't let you go anywhere now. Edie hugged her even tighter. Come on, love. 2001. Tears of joy spurted from Kate's eyes and flowed down her cheeks, and Edie tried to stop them with his kisses. Murmur, "Dear